Shake it. Shake it. Shake it. Shake it. Shake it like a Polaroid picture. As you guys see, I have a Polaroid shirt. Well, sweater. Alright guys, so it's that's the start of my video today. So guys, it's Monday, so we're gonna continue reading The Search for the Phoenix Gem and In-Questigation. I am so excited to keep reading this with you guys. Oh, my dog's on the desk kind of ways. Alright, I'm so excited to keep reading this book, guys. As I don't know if you may remember, but I absolutely love Sedalia. My favorite character in this book so far. She's very intuitive, and she's very like, she seems like she's an outgoing person, and she's very like audacious. So she has a lot of bravery for just going out and asking the big questions that some people her age wouldn't think of asking, because I think she's 16. You know, she's a sophomore in high school, so she's about 16. So I absolutely love the point of view that Sedalia is giving us in this book. I am so excited to keep reading it. And yeah, especially with you guys. I just love it so much. So we are going to continue reading. We are on chapter 8, I believe. Yes. We are going to start chapter 8. Let me move that real quick. Chapter 8. Sorry, it's backwards again, guys. It's just because this is on my phone. And that's the only way I can get a clear, like, great picture for you guys. Alright, so let's just kind of review real quick what we last read before we go on to reading. So what we last read was Sedalia was interviewing some characters, some other characters of the story that we weren't introduced to before. So before our last video, she had interviewed the Principal Pipplemill, and Mr. Nash, the janitor. After that, she went to a town meeting where they were discussing the events that happened on that day. And she ended up interviewing not only a friend of Ian's, who we never knew about from Onward, the book. We didn't know about him until this one. So he had another friend that we didn't get to know at all until she started interviewing him, and his name was Kagar. So after she interviews Kagar and gets more information about Ian, she learns that Barley has a friend. And that friend happened to be also at the town meeting. So she also interviewed him. His name was Grug, I think. I might be looking at the wrong name. I'll keep looking. But she decided that she was going to interview the both of them. So after Shrub was his name. After she interviewed Shrub, she got more information about not only Barley and like the relationship that him and Ian have, and like how their father had passed away, but she also learned about the Montecourse Tavern and how it had burned down. And she was asking Shrub how he knew it burned down and what had happened, and he told her that it was a friend's sister's friend's bachelorette party, something like that. Like, it was really long. Oh, here it is. Sister's best friend's cousin's friend's sister and her friends, that they were having a bachelorette party at the Montecourse Tavern, and the Montecourt ended up burning the head of the mascot and burned down the tavern, but that the tavern still survived because it was made of stone underneath, so everything was still there. So Sedalia decided that she was going to the Montecourse Tavern so she can she decides to do that towards the end of the chapter 7. But first, she does go to a place called Burgershire, and she interviews the bachelorette party because it just so happens that they go there almost every single day to have breakfast. So she finds them there. She has a conversation with them. She learns about the Montecourse Tavern, how it's still standing. So she decides that she's going to use her scooter the next day and drive over to Montecourse Tavern and get more information. Well, she ends up getting a phone call from her class teacher for the journalism class, and she tells her that she wants her to cover the story, but she needs it in 3 days. So she's not really, she said it should take her 2 or more weeks to get this story done, but she's only being given 3 days before she can publish it in the newspaper. So she's very excited, but she's also apprehensive because she's going to have a lot of trouble getting all of that story and getting all the people she needs to interviewed so she can make a clear and concise and great report on what had happened. So that's where we're at right now. Last we saw was her scooter had broke down. Her mom had to come pick her up. And she was just really excited about doing the story, and that she was the one that was being put in charge of it. So this is really exciting for her. So yeah, so we're already at 5 minutes. So let's just go ahead and get started with chapter 8. I'm gonna show you the page one more time. So sorry if it's backwards, guys. All right, so Sedalia started her day before sunrise the next morning. She had stayed up for 2 more hours going over her notes, and then spent another hour in bed, just lying there, thinking about everything. She didn't fall asleep until the early hours of the morning, and then woke to her alarm blaring at 6 a.m. Her mother had given her use of the minivan that day, for which Sedalia was thankful. The minivan wasn't exactly a prized possession, but her mom had extracted a promise that Sedalia would return the van without a scratch on it. She hopped into the driver's seat and drove over to Berkshire. The store was just opening at 6:30 when Sedalia arrived. She pulled into a parking spot and saw the sign twirler emerge from the front doors of the restaurant. Sedalia got out of the car and slammed the door. I just realized I forgot to mention, the sign twirler at Berkshire, it was actually the person wearing the Manticore costume at the Manticore's Tavern. So she was going to interview him and find out what he knew about this story happening at the Manticore's Tavern, why the Manticore burned everything down and went a little hectic. So that's the reason she went back to Berkshire. I forgot to mention that. Alright. Excuse me, sir. The elf dressed as a griffin burger turned around to see Sedalia running right at him, clutching her notepad and pencil. He was holding a big sign that read, "Best Griffin Burgers in Town. 2 for the price of 1. He suddenly dropped the sign and fell to the ground, crouching with his hands over his head. What do you want? Hey, don't freak out, Sedalia said. I'm just here to ask a few questions. I'm a reporter. A reporter? The burger asked, looking up at Sedalia. Yeah, a reporter. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm really sorry about that. The burger slowly lowered his arms from his head, then reached over to pick up his sign. It's alright. I'm just a little, on edge after what happened the other day. Yeah, about that, Sedalia said. I spoke to a group yesterday, and they said they were at the Manticore's Tavern for a bachelorette party 2 days ago. Totally true, said the burger. The karaoke machine wasn't working, though. They were really upset about it. So the Manticore ripped the mascot costume and set it on fire? The burger looked at Sedalia and nodded. I knew once that happened, we weren't gonna fix the karaoke machine. I mean, how could we? There was a melted Manticore's head, and the whole place was gonna go up in flames. Those women, they were so disappointed. I don't blame them. Can we talk about something other than the karaoke machine for a minute? Sedalia asked, getting frustrated. Like what? Like, for example, what's your name? Oh, that. It's Darmot. Sedalia nodded. So getting back to the fire. Yeah, about that. I was really bummed because the karaoke machine really gets people excited to be there. And I have a whole routine I do, like a dance kind of thing. And everyone loves it. Loves it. They all line up for photo ops with me, and kids want to give me high fives. And happy people means tips, which makes me happy. It's basic math, you know. Sedalia sighed. This interview wasn't going the way she thought it would. In fact, she wasn't sure it was an interview at all. But she realized she couldn't just quit. A good reporter knows how to make the most out of any situation, no matter how bad or hopeless it might seem. Was there anyone else there that night that you can remember? Sedalia asked. Anything out of the ordinary? Darmot thought for a moment. Well, my boss, the Manticore, she was having this conversation with 2 elves, and I think that's what upset her and made her rip off my head and set fire to it. I mean, not my real head. If that happened, I wouldn't be here talking to you now, dressed like a griffin burger, would I? Probably not, Sedalia said. So those 2 guys, any idea who they are? Egan, I think. One of them was named Egan, and the other one a big guy. He was Barmy. Egan and Barmy, Sedalia said, writing it down. Do you think it could have been Ian and Barley? Darmot shrugged. I mean, maybe. It's pretty hard to see or hear anything inside that Manticore suit, except for the karaoke. And the applause. I miss the applause. Do you think anyone applauds when you're dressed as a burger and spinning a sign? No, I guess they wouldn't, Sedalia said. And another thing about this sign, Darmot said, pointing at it. It's so bulky and heavy. How can I do any kind of artistic spins or flips when I can barely even hold it? When I said something to my new boss, he told me to keep my opinions to myself or I'd be looking for a new job. Anyway, so now I'm here. At least I'm making money. But no karaoke, no routine, no applause. Is there anything else you remember? Anything out of the ordinary? Sedalia said, desperate to get any additional information. Well, the small one, Egan. I think he used... Darmot paused dramatically. He leaned in close to Sedalia's ear, then whispered, Magic. Magic, Sedalia repeated at full volume. Not so loud, Darmot said, trying to shush her. Then everyone will know. So, Sedalia said, it's not like magic's against the law. Yeah, well, with my luck, he said, his voice trailing off. What makes you think he used magic? Sedalia asked. He said these words, and I remember them exactly because I wasn't wearing my mascot head. So I could hear everything. He said, Aloft Elevar. Aloft Elevar, Sedalia repeated, writing it down. How do you know that's magic? Once I played Quest of Yore, and that's one of the spells, he said. I gotta research my part, right? And two, when Egan said it, a blast of light came out of the staff he was holding, and it froze a burning beam right in mid-air. Sedalia recalled the staff Ian was wielding during the dragon battle. He was performing magic even before that event then. She wondered how long this had been going on. Anything else? Sedalia asked, ready to put her notepad away. Oh, Darmot shouted. There was a pair of pants. A pair of pants? Sedalia repeated. Could you be more specific? No, the elf said. It was just a pair of pants, walking around all by themselves. They had a top half at first, but then Barmy ripped it off. I was so shocked that I crashed into a waiter. Are you sure? Of course not. Like I said, once you have that mascot suit on, you can't be really sure of anything you see or hear. Like one time, I thought I saw a phoenix eat one of the customers. Well, what was it? Well, it wasn't so much a phoenix as it was a feathery hat that a kid was wearing. Thanks for your time, Sedalia said, anxious to pursue the story. No problem. It's one thing I have plenty of. Now that I don't have the karaoke or applause, then Darmot held the sign up and started to twirl. That's the end of chapter 8. So now we're going to start chapter 9. I feel kind of bad for Darmot, and it didn't with this situation, it didn't seem like Sedalia had much like sympathy or empathy for him. She just really wanted that story. I feel like she can get a lot more from the people she's interviewing if she at least makes comments about how they're feeling and, you know, makes like a connection with that, and then she could get the story a little more better than that. So I think she still has a way to go as an interviewer, but she's doing great so far. Alright, so chapter 9. Sedalia hopped back into her mom's minivan and turned the key. The vehicle started without a problem, which actually surprised her. She was so used to her scooter breaking down every 5 seconds that something working correctly seemed out of the ordinary. She zoomed onto the expressway, enjoying the freedom of the traffic-free lanes. This early in the morning, it would be easy for the minivan to speed toward the Montecourse Tavern and get there way before traffic began to pile up. And with her deadline in place, speed and time was of the essence. She was going over a mental checklist of interviews she'd already done, and interviews she needed in order to complete her piece on Ian and Barley. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a loud pop. If Sedalia had been remotely sleepy from getting up so early, she wasn't anymore. The minivan suddenly swerved to one side, and she had to fight the wheel as she hit the brakes, pulling over to the side of the road. Looking carefully to make sure no cars were approaching, Sedalia opened her door and went outside to take a look. One of her rear tires was flat. I can't believe it, Sedalia groaned. She kicked the tire in anger and frustration. It helped nothing, of course. It only hurt her toe. Ow! She cried. A second later, Sedalia heard the whoop whoop of a siren. She turned her head, and sure enough, pulling up right behind her was a police cruiser. Great, Sedalia thought. Just what I need, a ticket, on top of everything else. The police car door opened, and a tall Cyclops officer stepped out. Then the passenger door opened, and there was a shorter satyr officer. This one she recognized. It was Officer Gore from the school. Hey, Officer Gore, Sedalia said. What brings you out here? Sedalia, Officer Gore said, tipping her hat. We were just cruising by and saw a motorist with a flat tire. Thought we might be of assistance. Imagine my surprise to find that it's you. It's a small world, Sedalia said. And how do you two know each other? The other officer asked. Officer Gore told her partner about how Sedalia had ignored the police tape at the school and almost gotten her in hot water with Officer Bronco. Well, I'm Officer Spector, the other cop said. And I don't tolerate any funny business, so don't even try it. Just putting it out there. Noted, Sedalia said. Well, I'm sure you two might have better things to do than talk to an intrepid school reporter on the side of the expressway. She was hoping they would leave so she can change her flat tire and be on her way. Actually, no, Officer Gore said. At the moment, we are 100% not busy. So if you need a hand, well, we've got 4. Sedalia looked at them both and smiled. Well, I've got a jack in my trunk and a spare tire. Could you, watch the road to make sure I don't get sideswiped by a semi-truck? Officer Gore tipped her hat. Happy to, she walked back to the police cruiser and popped the trunk. Then she pulled out a few orange safety cones and placed them behind Sedalia's minivan, while Officer Spector kept her eye on the traffic. Sedalia loosened all the bolts on the tire before placing the jack under the minivan. As she pumped it, the left rear tire slowly raised off the ground. Where are you heading in such a hurry? Officer Gore asked, hands in her pocket. I'm working on a story right now, Sedalia said, as she removed the rear tire, rolling it off to the side. Got a tight deadline, so I gotta make every second count. Sounds important, Officer Gore said, interested. Can you give me a hint about what it's about? Well, it kind of involves you, to be honest, Sedalia said. She wasn't sure if she should even be admitting the subject of her story, given the resistance she had encountered earlier. Officer Gore brightened. What, like an Officer of the Year kind of thing? Me? Really? That's an honor. It sure would be, Sedalia said, but that's not exactly what I'm writing. She stood up, walked to the trunk, and took out the spare tire. It bounced when it hit the ground, and Sedalia rolled it over to the left rear of the minivan. Officer Gore deflated a little. Oh, sure, well, that would have been kind of sudden anyway. Sedalia placed the tire on the axle. I'm actually writing about what happened at school, the thing with the dragon. Alleged dragon, Officer Spector grunted from several feet away. Specifically, I'm working on a story about Ian and Barley Lightfoot, Sedalia said, hoping you would provoke a reaction from Officer Gore. Those two? They're in a heap of trouble, Officer Gore said. Especially that Barley. But I probably shouldn't say anything else. Can you give me one of those bolts? Sedalia asked. Officer Gore handed a bolt to her, and she took it in her grease-covered fingers. And of course, I wouldn't want you to say anything that would get you in trouble. I just thought maybe you might be able to fill me in on what kind of boys they are. Background stuff. Background stuff, Officer Gore said. Well, I guess. As long as we don't have to talk about the, alleged dragon, Officer Spector shouted. Right, that. Officer Gore continued, an annoyed look on her face. As long as we don't talk about that, I think it can be okay. Great, Sedalia said, as she put the wheel back on and tightened the bolt. So you said that you know Barley. Then she put out her hand, asking for another bolt. No, Officer Gore said, shaking her head. I mean, we don't really know him, but we know him by reputation. He's always getting into some kind of trouble, protesting this, complaining about that, like that fountain, the whole fountain business. What whole fountain business? Sedalia asked. Sorry, that falls in the category of stuff I shouldn't say anything about. Sedalia nodded her head. So what can you tell me about Ian then? Well, we ran into him a couple of nights ago. Where was this? At the school? This was out on the expressway, Officer Gore said. He was driving a purple van, studying to get his driver's license. Apparently, Officer Bronco was with him. Oh, they're talking about Guinevere. That Officer Colt Bronco? Sedalia clarified. She motioned for another bolt, then tightened it. That's the one, said Officer Gore. She said that he was taking Ian out for some driver's education drills. I think he called them. But the kid was swerving all over the road. Sedalia was confused. Why would Officer Bronco be teaching a random teenager how to drive? Was he a police officer by day and a driver's ed instructor by night? She asked Officer Gore to elaborate. Oh, Bronco was dating Laurel Lightfoot, Ian and Barley's mom, Officer Gore said. Seems like he's having a rough time by the sound of it. Yeah, I gave him some advice about that, Officer Spector added. It's not easy being a step-parent, but the whole interaction was suspicious. What do you mean? Sedalia asked, standing up. She grabbed an oily rag from the back of the trunk and wiped her greasy hands clean. Then she put it down and pulled a small notebook and pencil from her back pocket. Bronco was a little out of it. Ian was even more out of it. He was wearing all these big, fluffy clothes, and he was just wandering around. And you say Barley wasn't there? No sign of him. It was just Officer Bronco and Ian, Officer Spector said. And that's not even the weirdest part. Sedalia could tell both officers were warming up. She furiously jotted down notes and hoped that they would keep talking. Well, last night, when we saw Officer Bronco on the ground, there were hoof prints. That's not unusual, Sedalia said, puzzled. I mean, he's a centaur. He has hooves. Right, Officer Spector said. But when we looked at the trail of prints, it suddenly changed to sneaker prints. Sneaker prints? You mean like he suddenly put on sneakers over his hooves? Exactly, which makes no sense. You seen that guy's feet? No way he could wear sneakers. Not ones that would match those footprints we saw. Anyway, I got suspicious, so I radioed in to Bronco. And he said he was never on the expressway, and that he was never with Ian or with us. That doesn't make any sense, Sedalia said, hastily scribbling down some notes. Maybe he just didn't remember. Officer Spector shook her head. She's right, Officer Gore said. Colt? Officer Bronco? Forget something like that? Not likely. Guy's got a still trap mind, even if he is juggling a new family and all. You've been a huge help, Officer Gore, Sedalia said. You too, Officer Spector. Anytime, said Officer Gore. Looks like your tire's all fixed up. Sedalia opened the door to the minivan and hopped inside. Before she could turn the key, Officer Gore said, I think you're in trouble, miss. Sedalia's heart leaped in her throat. What was she talking about? She hadn't done anything wrong. What is it? You left that jack under your car, Officer Gore said. Won't get very far like that. Sedalia laughed, then hopped back out of the van and worked the lever so the jack would come loose. She put it in the trunk of the car and closed it. Thanks for the catch, Sedalia said, and the officers waved at her. She got back into the minivan and gave a thumbs up to the officers. Thanks for everything. As she was about to drive off, Sedalia had a thought. Wait, I saw Officer Bronco with Ian and Barley after the incident, and I'm guessing that Laura Lightfoot was the other one with them. Couldn't Officer Bronco help get the boys out of trouble? With him being in a position of authority and all? He'll probably do his best for Laurel's sake, Officer Spector said. But this is bigger than him. I hear that the mayor is asking for someone to be held responsible. Those boys caused some serious damage. While Sedalia pondered this latest information, the radios on the officers' uniforms blared, calling Officer Gore and Spector. Officer Gore answered the radio. This is Officer Gore, copy. There's been a robbery at a pawn shop, said the operator. Perpetrator's name is Grecklin. Said someone took a sword worth a considerable amount of money. It's called a curse crusher. We need you to go and take your statement. Curse crusher? Why does that name sound familiar? Sedalia thought. She began flipping through her notes. She knew she had heard that name before. Yes! Shrub mentioned that the Manticore was wielding the curse crusher during the battle. But why was it at a pawn shop? And how did it end up with the Manticore? Who stole it? If this was connected to the high school incident, Sedalia needed to check it out before the police could interfere. Copy that, Officer Gore said. But that's a pretty far drive for us. Aren't there any units closer? Define closer, came the response over the radio. Like, someone who isn't as far away as we are, Officer Gore said. There was a brief pause, and then the operator said, You want to get coffee first, don't you? Officer Gore shifted her feet uncomfortably. Any word on the Lightfoot boys? They're being taken downtown for processing. Downtown, thought Sedalia. That can't be good. I've got to fly, officers. Good luck. Sedalia called out as she put the minivan into drive and took off down the expressway. So that's the end of chapter 9. Oh man, I got some pretty I have some thoughts about what's going on so far, but I'm going to wait until we read this next part. We're going to read chapter 10, and then we'll end at chapter 10. So here's chapter 10, guys. We're going to go ahead and get started on that. The clock was ticking. The deadline was looming. The minivan was running with no further flat tires. Sedalia knew she had to get to the Montecour's tavern, but she needed to follow up on this new lead immediately, while it was still hot. She gunned the engine, giving the minivan as much gas as she dared. Crossing her fingers, even her toes, Sedalia hoped she'd make it to the pawn shop before the police did. It helped that the officers were probably going to stop for coffee along the way. That would give Sedalia a chance to beat them there. But when she looked up at the shop, using the owner's name on her phone, she saw that it really was a far drive. It would take her at least a couple of hours. She would need a lot of luck if she was going to stay ahead of Officers Gore and Spector. Thankfully, her mom's minivan kept chugging away, and soon enough, Sedalia had pulled into the parking lot. The shop was run down and dirty. The windows were so cloudy and covered with faded advertisements that she couldn't even see anything inside. Sedalia wondered how the shop got any business. She parked the minivan, hopped out, and ran to the front door of the pawn shop. She heard a bell ring. "Don't touch anything," came a voice from the back of the shop. Sedalia froze. "Even the floor?" She couldn't help herself. "Of course you can touch the floor," said the grizzled old goblin, emerging from behind a shelf filled with teacups. Grecklin was the owner of the shop. She had a scowl on her face and was moving exceptionally slow. "How else are you going to walk around here and find something to buy so I have money for dinner?" "I'm not here to buy anything," Sedalia started. Then you're not here," Grecklin said, and turned around. "My name's Sedalia. I'm with my school's newspaper, and I wanted to ask you some questions about your recent robbery." Grecklin looked at Sedalia and furrowed her brow. "You heard about that? News travels fast. I only called the cops about it a couple hours ago." Sedalia couldn't help smiling a little. "Yes, well, I'm really interested to see what happened. I'm wondering if it might be connected to the incident at school." Grecklin moved closer to Sedalia, looking her in the eye. Sedalia noticed the pawn shop owner kept both arms down at her sides, somewhat stiffly, and was barely lifting her feet off the floor when she walked, if at all. "Are you all right?" Sedalia asked. The goblin rolled her eyes. "I'm fine. Mind your own business." She shuffled toward the counter. "Blasted Montecour venom." "Montecour venom?" Sedalia asked, interested. "Yeah, Montecour venom. You ever been stung by the Montecour?" Sedalia shook her head. "I didn't even know about the Montecour until yesterday." "Well, I have," Grecklin said. "Can't do anything with my hands, and I can barely feel my feet." She said it would only last an hour, but of course you can't trust a thieving scoundrel like that. Instantly, Sedalia's mind started racing. The Montecour had been here, but why would she stop at this random pawn shop after her tavern had just burned down? "Can you tell me what happened exactly?" Sedalia said, whipping out her notepad and pencil. She started to write, but then the tip of her pencil snapped. You don't happen to have a pencil sharpener I could use, do you?" Grecklin moved to rub her chin with her right hand, but the hand was still numb from the Montecour venom, so all she could really do was swat herself in the face. She winced and put her hand back down. "Yeah, there's one behind the cash register you can use." "Thanks," Sedalia said, walking toward the register. "For 2 shards, Grecklin added, smirking. "You're charging me 2 shards to sharpen my own pencil?" Sedalia asked in disbelief. "It might be your pencil, but it's my pencil sharpener," Grecklin said. "That's the offer. Take it or leave it." Sedalia sighed. She dug into her pocket and found some loose coins. She threw them on the counter by the cash register and counted them out. "There's 2 shards exactly." "Just leave it there," Grecklin said. "Sharpen your pencil. Hurry up. I don't have all day." 1 pencil sharp later, Sedalia was standing next to Grecklin, feverishly taking notes. "So there I was, minding my own business," said Grecklin, "when this elf woman walks in. Now, I've never seen her before. And then the Montecour comes in with her. They seem to be in a real hurry." "In a hurry? Why? How should I know? They're looking for something called a curse crusher." "What's a curse crusher?" Sedalia asked. "Well," Grecklin said, "I'm going to go on a limb and guess that it's something that crushes curses." Sedalia wasn't in the mood for sarcasm, but she realized the only way she could get information from Grecklin was to play along. This curse crusher, what did it look like? Can you describe it? Grecklin nodded. It's a sword. I don't know about so high, she said, stretching her arms as wide as she could. Nothing fancy to look at, but the Manticore really wanted it. I told them they could have it for 10. Sedalia tilted her head slightly. 10? That seems like a reasonable price. 10,000, I mean. 10,000, Sedalia cried, trying to imagine anything in the shop full of dusty old microwave ovens, clock radios, and rusty armor were worth 10,000 anything. Isn't that a little high? Look, I don't set the prices, I just sell the stuff, Grecklin said. Sedalia stared at her. Okay, obviously I set the prices too, Grecklin offered, but I gotta make a living. Rent's not cheap. So what happened when you told them that the sword would cost 10,000? The woman said something about needing the sword for her sons. Sons, Sedalia thought. It was looking more and more likely that this woman was Laurel Lightfoot, Ian and Barley's mother. She flew in with the Manticore during the battle, and then was talking to Officer Bronco before the boys were taken away. But Sedalia wondered how the Manticore and Laurel even knew each other. They seemed like an odd pairing. So did they pay it? Asked Sedalia. If they paid it, Grecklin said, do you think I would have called the cops? Not only did they steal it from me, but that monster stings me on top of it. Wait a minute, Sedalia said, checking her notes. When I first asked how much the sword cost, you said 10, not 10,000. Grecklin shrugged. I must have forgotten. Maybe the Manticore venom got to my brain and made me all goofy. I don't think that's what happened at all, Sedalia said. I think you offered 10, and when you find out they needed the sword, you jacked up the price. Grecklin appeared indignant, flopping a hand against her chest. Do I look like the kind of person who would cheat somebody? Yes. Touché. Did they pay anything for the sword? Sedalia asked. Yeah, they left, 10? Grecklin said. So it's not like the sword was stolen. More like you didn't get to rip off a customer like you'd hoped. Grecklin rolled her eyes. The Manticore said it was the only sword of its kind, and was forged of some rare metal. Only a fool wouldn't have raised the price after hearing that, and Grecklin is no fool. Sedalia was not in the process of closing her notepad and putting it away when she heard the bell. The front door opened, and in walked Officers Gore and Spector. Hello, said Officer Spector, looking around the shop. We hear about the complaint of a stolen sword. Oh, no, that's the end of it. Alright guys, that's the end of chapter 10. Wow! So, I have some thoughts about that so far. If you don't want to hear my thoughts, of course, you can always just, stop the video. But I like to kind of give, what I think so far and see if you guys think the same. So, I'm noticing Sedalia is very lucky. Not only is she, doing this story by herself, but she's having these very convenient moments where she meets people by coincidence who actually know more and can add more to the story. So she met, she heard about, what was his name again? Gurge or something like that. Ian's friend. She heard about Ian's friend from Althea. And then she meets him, ends up meeting Shrub, which is Barley's friend, just by coincidence, happened to be behind her at the same place. Spoke to him, and then she goes to Berkshire to find the bachelorette party that Shrub had told them about. And it's just, how convenient is it that he knew about the bachelorette party in general, that he knew someone who was there? And how convenient was it that they were just at Berkshire when she went to go check? And how convenient is it that the sign twirler is the same person who wore the Manticore uniform, the suit, at the Manticore's tavern? And what a coincidence that she ends up getting a flat tire on the expressway. And the two officers who had spoke to Ian and Barley are the two officers that come to help her. And one of them is someone she met before. And just immediately starts telling her things because she knows what she's doing. She knows she's a good person. So, and how convenient they call in the robbery. We'll say robbery. And it just so happens to be they're right next to each other when she hears about it, and she hears where it's at, and she's able to get there on time to interview Grecklin. It's just a lot of convenient like events happen to Sedalia. So she's this story is basically falling into her lap. Like she's following hunches, and then she finds another one and she keeps going. So I feel like she's a very, very lucky reporter. She is great at what she does, but I feel like a lot of it is just convenience. She just happens to be there, and she picks it up and remembers it. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that's happening so far for her. And I do feel like she needs more patience too, because with how she's doing the stories and like how she talks about how she's frustrated, it seems like she needs to kind of take a step back and remember she's talking to people who just were a part of this huge event that she only saw the end of. Like, these people were included in it from like the intervals going up to the climax of the story. Like, they were a part of it, but when they had something happen to them. So she needs to be a little more patient with how they speak to her, because like I'd understand Grecklin could be upset because in her mind they robbed her and they poisoned her, so she wasn't even able to move. So it just seems like she needs to put herself in the mindset of understanding the people she's interviewing, so then she can be more patient and just more understanding. So that's my only critique of Sedalia so far. Other than that, she's very intuitive. Like I said, she's very audacious. She's outward. She really wants to put her all into this story, even though it wasn't even like her job, kind of. Like, her passion is making her take this story, and the story is just falling in her lap. Like, she's getting very lucky. So I think that going along with everything is just interesting. And I'm interested to see when she's going to finally speak to Barley and Ian, because of course they're the ones that are going to shed the most light on this story. Right now she's just picking up hints and clues about what the story is about. So like, she's learning a lot, and she's making like she's connecting them on her own, which is interesting. Like, she knew that Grecklin was ripping them off. Like, it's interesting that she automatically knew that just by speaking to Grecklin. She is very, very what would I say? Perceptive. She's perceptive of little things that she can put together, and she's able to connect them in her mind and make the story more clear. And that does help her with the story. So she's actually a very great reporter so far. Just a little, like, her own little quirks. But other than that, she's great. So I hope you liked the chapters we read today, guys. I was very excited to read it. I can't wait to read what's next. And see if she gets in trouble or not by Officer Gore and Spectre. Because they're about to they just walked in. So I'm wondering how that's going to go down. But yeah, so guys, if you want to keep up with the story with me, you can subscribe so that you can get the latest updates on the book. I will be updating again on Wednesday and then on Friday. So it's always Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So if you're interested in the book, go ahead and come back on Wednesday and, you know, watch the video with me, read it with me, and get the rest of the details, the juicy details of this story. I'm really excited. So you guys take care. Have a wonderful Monday and Tuesday, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye, guys.